everyone, and welcome to our first lesson on the American Industrial Revolution and the expansion of industry in America. This first lesson is on that growth, and we're going to be looking at a number of reasons why industry grew in America, especially in those post-Civil War years. Let's start, though, with that discussion of the Civil War, because this Industrial Revolution didn't start after the Civil War. It actually started in the early 1800s to drift over from Great Britain. But the Civil War really helps to kickstart it, because during that Civil War, the American North really industrialized for the war effort. They had to create more factories to produce more weapons and uniforms and all the things that the Union soldiers needed. So the American Civil War really helped to accelerate the American Industrial Revolution. Other advantages existed within America, though. America covers a huge area of land, much larger than any of the European nations. And within this area, we've got a lot of natural resources. A lot of stuff just exists here in the ground or growing from the ground. We've got tremendous mineral wealth, copper and iron and all these other metals needed to create things in our factories. And this mineral wealth encouraged that growth of factories. But to get those materials, we also had to build roads and canals and railroads, because you wanted your factories to be where the people were. Your factories are going to be in cities, and they're actually going to lead to cities growing themselves. A lot of people urbanized during this time. They moved to urban areas. They moved to cities. But the resources weren't in the city. The resources were outside in the mountains and the hills and the fields, well beyond the city. So you had to build roads and canals and railroads to get those resources to the factories in the cities. Another thing that the U.S. had going for it was a growing population. This was a period of extremely high immigration for the United States. And immigration is always good for an economy. It helps that economy grow because you get waves of generally lower paid workers that come to your country to get these jobs. And the skills that these immigrants brought to America made American industry really competitive. We really grew largely on the back of immigration between 1860 and 1900. During that time, the American population more than doubled. We went from 31 million to 76 million in that 40-year period of time. And that wasn't just natural population growth. That was largely driven by immigration. And that provided our new American factories with both more workers and more customers. So we could produce more goods with more workers and then sell to more customers because we had that growing population. Really worked out very well. Now, businesses saw that this was happening and saw that this was a great way to invest and to make your money earn money for you. So wealthy individuals and banks loaned businesses money, the money that they needed to expand. So you've got one factory. That one factory can't fill all of your orders. Demand is so high, you want to build 3 more factories right away, but you don't have enough money. Well, wealthy individuals or banks say, one day you're going to have the money to pay us back, so we're going to loan you money and we're going to collect interest on that. And businesses grew, and smart investors who picked the right companies made tons of money at this time, insane amounts of money, and we're going to talk about that in a later lesson. The U.S. government also helps businesses, not with direct aid, not with, they're not the ones giving them loans, but with new tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods. And with land grants, they would give them land to build and expand on. And with subsidies. Subsidies help them a little bit financially. Business cycle. This whole growth of American business, though, it was not this steady upward pace. It had its great years and its bad years, its booms and its busts. And this is all a part of something called the business cycle. The idea that your overall growth line is positive, but you have your bad years and your great years. So while the nation's growing, you've got your ups and downs all along the way. You've got recession, recovery, and then you're at your peak. And then another recession, another recovery, and you've got a new peak that was better than the first. This is a business cycle, and we went through this during the late 1800s, so much so that we had two really bad depressions. 1873, and this is the one that led to the Grant administration getting into a lot of trouble and the end of Reconstruction, and then another one in 1893. But despite those lows, the economy was really booming. It was really growing very well. Where was it growing? Well, steel wound up being the main industry of growth. U.S. became the world's #1 steel producer during this time. And it was because of this new development in making steel, the Bessemer steel process. I'm not going to get into the details of how this works, but just know that it dramatically cut the cost of making steel. So you could now make steel for 1/7 the cost that you used to. So making steel becomes easier, more effective. You can make more things of steel. You can sell more things that are made of steel. So you start producing more steel. And steel production went up 500 times. We're making 500 times more steel between the years right after the American Civil War up to 1900. And this is really going to drive the creation of skyscrapers in the United States. All right, Edison and electricity. Thomas Edison has a number of inventions that he's really well known for, and some that he's not as well known for, but he did some incredible things with electricity and engines and generators. He's best known for inventing the safe and reliable light bulb. That's kind of what we all remember him for. But perhaps a more important invention was the electrical generator. This is how we get electricity into our houses. It's by creating it in an electric generator. Edison invented those. And with Edison's generators, cities started to produce electricity, and they started to electrify their cities. And pretty soon you could have electricity running into your factories, and you could have lighting in those factories so that you could work around the clock. And it really created this boom in industries and the growth of cities. Alexander Graham Bell and the telephone is another one. People began sending information across wires back in the 1830s. This was Samuel Morse. He had invented the telegraph and Morse code. And communication over wires was something Americans were familiar with by 1835. But we couldn't send a voice over that wire. You couldn't have a conversation and hear the other person until Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone in 1876. Now, inventions did change industry. This was a period of a lot of invention. We had the telephone, the typewriter, the sewing machine, and they all brought people together. People would go and work together in places, and this improved efficiency. It lowered costs for everybody. These technological inventions benefited both businesses and people. And they opened the American workforce to more people. More people could come and get jobs, particularly here, women. Until the late 1800s, very, very few women held jobs outside of their homes. Women were housewives. That was what they did. They stayed at home, they raised the children, they cleaned the house. That was the job that women had. But these inventions open up more jobs, and more women become typists. That is, they sit at a typewriter and they copy reports that came to them. They also become switchboard operators for operating telephones. So it used to be that you would call the operator and they would connect you manually to another place. Now, we have systems in place where we don't need to use operators like this. And we also had women sewing in factories and making garments. So more and more women got jobs, and these were jobs that they could keep after they had gotten married. All right, well, that was our lesson for the day, really looking at how industry in America grew. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you learned something. I'll see you next time. Farewell.